Star Trek promised a utopian future where humanity had evolved beyond petty conflicts. But, behind the cameras, the cast and crew were locked in bitter feuds that would make Klingons blush. From dangerous on-set accidents to secret affairs that destroyed marriages, the real drama happened when the cameras stopped rolling. These are the incredible stories that even die-hard Trekkies don't know.
This is Captain Kirk. Hold your fire. We have your commander aboard.
Commander?
Destroy this vessel.
Production nightmares. Those legendary battles started from day one, when the production itself became a dangerous nightmare that broke every rule in Hollywood. The budget for Star Trek was so tight that producers Herb Solow and Robert Justman had to get creative in ways that would make modern studios cringe. Instead of paying union costume designers the standard rates, they secretly had all the Starfleet uniforms made overnight in an illegal sweatshop. The finished costumes were literally smuggled past the crew through a rear window to avoid detection by union representatives. But this costume conspiracy was nothing compared to what happened when the cameras started rolling. When it came time to film explosive scenes, safety took a backseat to spectacular effects. In the episode called The Apple, Spock throws a small rock that explodes when it hits the ground. Sounds harmless enough, right? Wrong. The sound effects they used were so incredibly loud that several actors had to be rushed to the hospital with severe inner ear injuries. DeForest Kelley, who played Dr. McCoy, suffered from tinnitus for the next 20 years of his life because of that single scene. But even that paled in comparison to the most terrifying moment that came after. During the filming of Shore Leave, the production team decided to use a real Bengal tiger for one of the scenes. Everything seemed under control until the massive predator broke free from its handlers and started prowling around the set. William Shatner later described the experience as sheer abject terror, saying the ignorant machismo that normally pulsed through his veins was instantly replaced by pure fear. But the real chaos was just getting started. And here's the twist that nobody talks about. This wasn't even the most dangerous thing happening behind the scenes. The creator's scandal that would rock the entire production was far more explosive. Roddenberry's Secret Affairs. Roddenberry created a show about evolved humans who had moved beyond primitive desires and petty conflicts. Behind the scenes, he was living the exact opposite of that philosophy. While his wife Eileen was at home raising their children, Roddenberry was conducting simultaneous affairs with not one, but two of his leading ladies. The first affair was with Majel Barrett, who played Nurse Chapel on the series. But Roddenberry didn't stop there. He was also secretly involved with Nichelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura. Both women knew about each other, creating an incredibly tense love triangle that played out daily on the Enterprise set. Cast members later described the atmosphere as walking through a minefield whenever all three were present. But here's where it gets even more scandalous. Roddenberry wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was stealing money from his own show. He wrote lyrics to the Star Trek theme song that were never intended to be sung or used. This allowed him to claim 50% of the royalties that should have gone entirely to composer Alexander Courage. The lyrics were so bad that even Roddenberry admitted they were lousy, but they made him rich while robbing the actual composer of his rightful earnings. The affairs created chaos that went far beyond personal drama. Majel Barrett's role as the ship's first officer was dramatically reduced in the second pilot because network executives felt the romantic tension between her and Roddenberry was too obvious on screen. This decision essentially destroyed what could have been television's first female starship commander, all because the creator couldn't keep his personal life separate from his professional responsibilities. The situation became so toxic that it nearly destroyed the show before it ever made it to air. But Roddenberry's personal scandals were just the beginning of the interpersonal warfare that would define Star Trek for decades. The Shatner-Taki feud. While Roddenberry was busy destroying relationships behind the scenes, an even more explosive feud was brewing between two of his biggest stars. William Shatner and George Takei's hatred for each other became so legendary that it's still making headlines today, more than 50 years later. The conflict started during the very first season, when Shatner realized that Takei was getting more fan mail than he was. As the show's lead, Shatner couldn't tolerate being upstaged by anyone, especially the actor playing a supporting character. He began deliberately sabotaging Takei's scenes by changing his blocking at the last minute, forcing Takei to scramble to adjust his performance while the cameras were rolling. But Shatner's petty behavior escalated into something much more sinister. During the filming of The Naked Time, Takei had prepared an emotional scene where Sulu would break down and cry. Just before they called action, Shatner whispered something so cruel and personal to Takei that the younger actor was visibly shaken and couldn't deliver his lines. The scene had to be rewritten on the spot, and Takei never forgot the humiliation. The breaking point came during the production of Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, which Shatner directed. Takei had been promised a significant role in the film, but when he arrived on set, he discovered that most of his scenes had been cut without warning. When he confronted Shatner about it, the Captain Kirk actor allegedly told him, "Nobody cares about Sulu. You're lucky to be in the movie at all." What makes this feud even more devastating is how it affected the entire cast. Leonard Nimoy tried repeatedly to mediate between them, but both actors refused to back down. The tension became so unbearable that other cast members would literally avoid being in the same room with both of them. Even decades later, at Star Trek conventions, organizers have to carefully schedule their appearances to prevent public confrontations. The most shocking part, this bitter rivalry was just one of several feuds tearing the Enterprise crew apart, and the next one involved the show's most beloved friendship, the Nimoy-Shatner friendship betrayal. For decades, fans believed that Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner shared the same close friendship as their characters Spock and Kirk. The truth is far more heartbreaking. What started as a genuine bond between two actors slowly deteriorated into one of Hollywood's most painful betrayals. In the early years, Nimoy and Shatner were genuinely close friends. They vacationed together. Their families spent holidays with each other, and Nimoy even served as best man at one of Shatner's weddings. But success changed everything, and it wasn't Nimoy who changed, it was Shatner. As Star Trek's popularity exploded, Shatner became obsessed with maintaining his status as the show's undisputed star. When Nimoy's Spock character began receiving more fan attention and critical acclaim, Shatner couldn't handle it. He started demanding script changes that would reduce Nimoy's screen time and give him more heroic moments. Behind Nimoy's back, Shatner would meet with producers to complain that Spock was overshadowing Captain Kirk. The betrayal reached its peak during the filming of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Nimoy had negotiated a producer credit and was excited to have more creative control, but Shatner secretly lobbied the studio executives to remove Nimoy from any decision-making roles, arguing that having two leads with producer credits would create confusion on set. Nimoy only discovered this betrayal years later, when a studio executive accidentally mentioned Shatner's behind-the-scenes campaign against him. What made it even more devastating was how Shatner handled their friendship publicly. While continuing to smile and joke with Nimoy in front of cameras and fans, he was simultaneously spreading rumors about Nimoy being difficult to work with and too demanding to anyone in Hollywood who would listen. These whispers nearly cost Nimoy several major film roles outside of Star Trek. The final blow came when Nimoy was battling COPD in his final years. Despite their decades of friendship, Shatner was notably absent from Nimoy's life during his illness. When Nimoy died in 2015, Shatner claimed he couldn't attend the funeral because of a prior commitment, a charity event that he could have easily rescheduled. But even this devastating personal betrayal wasn't the most shocking scandal to rock the Star Trek universe. The darkest secret involved something that happened off-camera that the studio desperately tried to cover up: the Grace Lee Whitney cover-up. What happened to Grace Lee Whitney, who played Yeoman Janice Rand, represents one of Hollywood's most shameful cover-ups from the 1960s. Her sudden disappearance from Star Trek after just 8 episodes wasn't due to creative differences or budget cuts, as the studio claimed for decades. The truth is far more sinister. Whitney was sexually assaulted by a high-ranking Star Trek executive during the first season. She never publicly named her attacker, but she revealed that it was someone with significant power over the production who she trusted completely. The assault happened after what she thought was a friendly dinner meeting to discuss her character's future on the show. Instead of supporting their victim, the studio's response was to systematically destroy Whitney's career. Within weeks of the incident, her character was written out of the show with no explanation. When she tried to speak up about what had happened, she was told that going public would end her acting career permanently. The studio's legal team made it clear that they had the resources to bury both her and her story. The cover-up went even deeper than just silencing Whitney. The studio spread rumors throughout Hollywood that she was unstable and difficult to work with. These whispers followed her for years, making it nearly impossible for her to find steady work. She fell into alcoholism and drug addiction, struggling to cope with both the trauma and the systematic destruction of her livelihood. What makes this even more horrifying is how the cast and crew were manipulated into participating in the cover-up without realizing it. When Whitney suddenly disappeared from the show, they were told she had personal problems and were discouraged from contacting her. Many of her former colleagues only learned the truth decades later, when Whitney finally found the courage to speak publicly about her experience. The most chilling part of this scandal is that it wasn't an isolated incident. Whitney later revealed that she knew of other women in the Star Trek universe who had similar experiences, but were too terrified to come forward. The culture of silence and intimidation was so complete that these victims remained hidden for decades. But even this dark secret wasn't the end of Star Trek's behind-the-scenes nightmares. The final scandal involves something that happened during the show's most famous episode, and it nearly killed one of the series' biggest stars. The Amok Time near-death incident. Amok Time is considered one of Star Trek's greatest episodes, featuring the iconic fight scene between Spock and Kirk on the planet Vulcan. What fans don't know is that this legendary episode nearly became a real-life tragedy that would have ended the series forever. The fight scene was supposed to be carefully choreographed with professional stunt coordinators, but budget constraints forced the production to cut corners in the most dangerous way possible. Instead of hiring experienced fight choreographers, they gave the job to an assistant director who had never worked on a combat scene before. The weapons they used weren't the safe props that modern productions would require. They were actual metal implements that could cause serious injury. During rehearsals, everything seemed to be going smoothly, but when they started filming the actual scene, something went terribly wrong. William Shatner was supposed to duck under one of Leonard Nimoy's swings, but the timing was off by just a split second. The metal weapon connected with Shatner's skull with a sickening crack that everyone on set heard. Shatner collapsed immediately, blood pouring from a gash in his head. The on-set medic rushed over and quickly realized this wasn't a minor injury. Shatner had suffered a severe concussion and needed immediate hospitalization. But here's where the story gets truly shocking. The producers decided to keep filming. While Shatner was being rushed to the hospital, the assistant director told Leonard Nimoy they needed to continue shooting reaction shots and close-ups to stay on schedule. Nimoy was so shaken by what had happened that he could barely deliver his lines, but the cameras kept rolling. If you watch the episode today, you can actually see the genuine terror in Spock's eyes during several shots. That wasn't acting. That was Nimoy's real fear that he had seriously injured his friend. The cover-up began immediately. The studio told the press that Shatner had suffered a minor bump during filming and would be back to work the next day. In reality, he spent 3 days in the hospital with doctors monitoring him for brain swelling. The head injury was so severe that Shatner suffered from chronic headaches and memory problems for months afterward. But the most disturbing part of this incident wasn't the injury itself. It was how the studio handled the aftermath. Instead of implementing better safety protocols, they simply made the cast sign new liability waivers that essentially freed the production from any responsibility for future injuries. The message was clear: the show must go on, no matter what the cost to human life. This near-fatal accident was just the beginning of a pattern of reckless endangerment that would plague Star Trek productions for years to come. The real secrets behind the final frontier. The truth about Star Trek's creation is more remarkable than any fiction, a story of genuine innovation, real risks, and extraordinary persistence that changed television forever. Gene Roddenberry's original pitch for Star Trek was so unconventional that NBC executives literally didn't know what to do with it. He described it as wagon train to the stars. But what he really created was something unprecedented. A racially integrated crew in 1966 America, with a Russian officer during the Cold War, and storylines that tackled civil rights, war, and social justice through science fiction metaphors. The network was so uncertain they did something almost unheard of. They commissioned 2 pilot episodes. The first, The Cage, was rejected as too cerebral. The second pilot became Where No Man Has Gone Before. But even then, NBC demanded major changes, including the removal of the satanic, pointed-eared alien character. Roddenberry fought to keep Spock, and that single decision shaped television history. The interracial kiss. That almost wasn't the famous kiss between Kirk and Uhura in Plato's Stepchildren required extraordinary courage from everyone involved. NBC was terrified of Southern affiliates refusing to air the episode. The compromise was to film 2 versions, one with the kiss, one without. But William Shatner and Nichelle Nichols deliberately sabotaged the non-kiss takes by crossing their eyes or making faces, ensuring only the kiss version was usable. The real shock? When the episode aired, NBC received the largest volume of fan mail in the network's history, and it was overwhelmingly positive. Nichelle Nichols' near departure. After the first season, Nichelle Nichols planned to leave Star Trek to pursue Broadway opportunities. At a civil rights fundraiser, she mentioned this to a fan, who turned out to be Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He told her she couldn't quit because she was playing the first non-stereotypical black character on television, and that his children saw her as proof they could be anything. She stayed, and later worked with NASA to recruit minority astronauts. The fans who saved the show. Star Trek's cancellation after 2 seasons sparked the first major organized fan campaign in television history. Fans organized letter-writing campaigns, protests, and even took out newspaper ads. The campaign worked. NBC renewed the show for a third season, though they moved it to the death slot of Friday nights at 10 p.m. Leonard Nimoy's identity crisis. Nimoy struggled so intensely with being typecast as Spock that he wrote a book titled I Am Not Spock in 1975. The Vulcan character had taken over his life to the point where fans would approach him on the street expecting him to behave logically and emotionlessly. It took years for him to make peace with the role, eventually writing a follow-up book, I Am Spock. Despite Star Trek's later success, the original series was made on an incredibly tight budget. The Enterprise bridge was built for $8,000. The transporter effect was created by dropping glitter through water and filming it. Many alien planets were actually the same California locations, shot from different angles. The crew often had to reuse props and costumes from other shows, leading to Roman centurions and gangsters appearing in various episodes. And perhaps the most mind-blowing fact is how Star Trek's optimistic vision actually influenced reality. The show inspired real astronauts, engineers, and scientists. The flip phone was directly inspired by Kirk's communicator. The first African-American woman in space, Mae Jemison, became an astronaut, partly because of Uhura's influence. The real story of Star Trek shows us that truth can be more inspiring than fiction. From breaking barriers to shaping the future, its legacy continues to shine brighter than any scandal ever could. If you love uncovering the hidden truths behind iconic films and shows, don't stop here. Click the video on your screen to discover things most fans didn't know about Forrest Gump. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with what you'd like us to explore next. See you there.